good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the next episode of the CSA Revolution Series, Season 2, Episode 4. Hard to believe it's been a year plus now in the making with this episodic series around CSA. I'm grateful and thankful to have Ron from the Johnson & Johnson on board to give us a really enlightening presentation today. So, gentlemen, let's go ahead and jump in. With us today, we have Mr. Ron Chardong, Johnson & Johnson, Senior Director of Quality. We also have Mr. Khalid Musali, Executive Vice President at Compliance Group for Clients and Regulatory Relations. And then we also have Mr. Stephen Cook from Compliance Group, who is our VP of Quality and Computer Compliance. So, without further ado, Khalid, the floor is now yours, sir.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Ron, for joining us. And just a disclaimer, I know we're talking about software defects, but it doesn't mean CSA only applies to testing, because we've been hearing this myth, right? Oh, CSA, it's all about testing. And Ron is going to tell you. So basically, I know in every episode we have some new folks. I don't want to leave them in the dark. I just want to give them really a quick overview of CSA, the FDA industry CSA team, the 5 things you need to know about CSA, where Stephen will walk us through it, who implemented CSA, and the ISBE GAMP CSA appendix. We'll get to that in a minute. And of course, we'll have our featured speaker, Mr. Ron Chardong. The FDA industry team have worked tirelessly for the past 5+ years. Ron and I, we've been part of this team, and we worked really hard on streamlining the computer system validation process. We did not want to migrate you from CSV to CSA. We just streamlining the current process and really focusing on risk-based approach and critical thinking. So we are not migrating from CSV to CSA. We're not deleting CSV, so please keep that in mind. As you can see, there's folks from various organizations, pharma, biotech, medical device. This is not just it is a CDRH initiative. However, many centers within the FDA are coming on board and joining the concept of CSA. So please just acknowledge the team members here. And then I'm just going to take you straight to CSA, where Stephen is going to go really quickly through it, because we need more time for Ron than us talking about CSA, since CSA now is becoming global. It is global. Everyone understands it, understand the concept, and what we're trying to accomplish out of it, focusing on patient, product, and data integrity. Stephen, all yours.
Yeah, let me back up something you said there, Khalid, on CSV and CSA. They're both different paths to the same destination. And I faced this question yesterday with a company going from CSV to CSA. What do we do about all of our CSV validations? Do we have to redo them? No, they're validated. This is just a different methodology, guys. They're going to the same destination. So let's talk about the 5 things you need to know about CSA. First of all, risk is measured by looking at potential impact to product quality, patient safety, and data integrity measured against the requirements complexity, whether it's out of the box, it's configured, or it's custom. A lot of people ask, okay, this is the FDA, we're a global organization, how are other regulators going to see this? You've heard me say this, you've heard Cisco and Centia, the FDA say this. Find a regulator anywhere in the world that says when you're measuring risk against impact to patient safety, that you're using the wrong measuring stick. You won't. 2, it actually calls for the least burdensome documentation approach. And how do you get there? It reduces testing. It reduces scripted testing by up to 80% with unscripted and ad hoc. Let's be clear about that. Unscripted testing does not mean undocumented. I hear it all the time. Unscripted does not mean undocumented. It gets a test case ID. It gets a run ID. It gets a pass-fail. It gets a signature date, and it goes into your traceability matrix. Unscripted is not undocumented. 4, what we find is when you unhandcuff your testers from prescribed step-by-step click-level instructions and they engage with that computer system more naturally, they're pretty darn good at finding the errors. and not documentation errors in scripts, but actual functional errors. So 4, it results in less issues encountered in production. And we've seen this time and time again, where unscripted test cases, and we've done parallel studies doing a CSV validation and a CSA validation, and the CSA released a system to production with less post-release issues encountered. And 5, last but not least, it is supported both by FDA and ISPE GAMP. Last November, GAMP issued their GDG, Data Integrity by Design, I think I got it wrong, Data Integrity by Design CSA Appendix.
Yep. Ron, any comments here?
No, it's good, and I think encourage everyone to take a look at that. I think it is a good practice guide, and we're along those lines. It definitely has some really good information there. So if you're waiting for the FDA to release the guidance, you don't need to wait anymore. You can have a pretty good idea by taking a look at that GAMP appendix.
Awesome. So for those of you who have not clicked on that link yet, when we send you the this slide deck, please click on that link and purchase the GPG, not GDG. Okay, Stephen, GPG, Data Integrity by Design, and focus on, well, of course, I need you to read everything about it, but focus on chapter 19, the appendix on computer software assurance. Myself and a few others from the FICSA team and friends were called upon by the ISPE committee and asked us if we can draft a CSA appendix to help really the industry, either convince the industry or help the industry that CSA is an existing concept. Today, it is in the current GAMP 5. If you go to GAMP 5 today, it talks about risk-based approach, it talks about critical thinking. This is just a marketing trick, okay? We're tricking you people. This is CSA has existed for the past 20 plus years. However, we put a twist to it. Of course, we're a little smart 15 gangs from the FICSA team. We came up with some ideas to really help you recognize that you can do it in so many different ways. By the way, there isn't one way of applying CSA, okay? Just wanted to make sure. So please pay attention to that. Next, as I mentioned earlier, hundreds of companies are implementing CSA. We're not gonna wait for anyone to accept, say, yes, oh, maybe I'm still thinking about it. It's okay, it's okay. There's quality tolerance, there's risk tolerance, there's a certain quality organization, they may not agree to it yet until the guidance. What I really want to convey to you, this is within the current regulations and it's just a concept and a validation strategy, okay? Gentlemen, anything you want to, anything you want to add before we move to Ron? Stephen, any comments on here? All right, Ron? All right, the floor is yours, sir. Ron is going to talk about specific value added to defect handling, of course, while applying CSA. So it's all yours, Ron. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So I have to give the legal disclaimer that is on that page there. Again, these are, again, it's intended to be educational in nature. The other thing is I have to give like my personal disclaimer, which is advice is as good as the price that you pay for it. Since mine is free, it's probably not very good, but I'll give it to you anyways. So, but no, like in all seriousness, again, Kali actually reached out to me like not too long ago and said, hey, like we need to put, again, maybe like move into not necessarily talking about CSA, but some of the how-tos. And again, how do we apply critical thinking? Because again, CSA is not all just about testing. And obviously this, what I'm be talking to you today is about a little bit about testing, but also, it's applying critical thinking to the process. So I think we need to ask ourselves the questions like, are all defects created equally? And so that's what I'm going to share with you a little bit is some work that we have done internally. Obviously, it does not give you like like step by step about our procedures or anything, but kind of like you can in some ways reverse engineer how we're tackling this moving forward. So the purpose today is to give you a alternative process. Again, does this mean that it's going to be prescribed in CSA? No. Again, this is just our interpretation looking at particular situation for our company, but it's just like how you look at and handle defects, particularly here is about tester error. So essentially when your tester actually causes a defect, and also errors that are caused by your test script. And sometimes, again, as you know, especially if you're using like very detailed step-by-step test scripts, that sometimes it is not well written, and it actually leads to a defect, but it's not because there is something wrong with the application. It's just again, the script led to that defect. So as part of what I'm going to be sharing with you, it is something that is aligned with GAMP. So again, we're not creating new rules or new regulation or anything like that. So it is race-based. It is something that it is deemed to be compliant, but also something that will decrease the cost related to processing those defects, because that usually means there is some work associated with that. One thing that is out of scope today, so again, just not to think that we didn't think this thing through, but and I think it could be like a webinar of its own, is training, when training is the root cause of the defects or testing errors. So again, we're not going to be tackling training. Many times that is the default answer that people say is like, oh, we have a defect because of training. Again, we're skipping that one today, but probably like a topic for another day. So Kyle, if we can go to the next slide. So just walking you through the process a little bit and looking what the current process was when we embarked on this journey. And this is something that actually it wasn't done by me. It was done by some people like under my organization. So again, I don't want to take credit for work that I didn't do myself, but just sharing with you what the team has done. And so looking at what was our process at the time, and we had several categories for root cause for defects, and also so you can see that, and it is highlighted specifically there. Some of the root causes that we had was task script error as being one, and tester error as being another one, and also like, because we tend to categorize information for analytical purposes. Testing, so in terms of defect type, we had testing where, again, it was a test data error, or under testing, we also had the environment, script design, and tester error. So just giving you a little bit of background as to how we used to structure the data and the information so that we could also use that for analytical purposes. So next slide, please. So one thing to understand is, again, and I asked the question earlier, is like, are all defects created equally? And again, you could, and in some ways we were treating defects like all the same. Most of they were all created equal and kind of like they went through the same process all the time. And particularly, again, here, just giving you an idea of some of the steps that we went through when we were processing tester errors and test script errors. So the defect typically included documenting, again, an analysis of that, root cause, what was the proposed resolution, and also what was the final resolution. And so every defect was typically associated or linked to a test run. So there was, again, some linking that had to occur, or at least like referencing. If we were using, and again, this is like a counter CSA, but again, if you were using like a paper system for defect handling, they usually were approved multiple times by multiple resources. So essentially it took time to actually route it and get people to review and approve and concur in that. If using HPLM or a similar tool for, again, tracking bugs and testing, then typically it was approved like one time, but by multiple people. So still multiple people had to approve that. Typically, we summarized all the defects in our, again, as part of like it's one of the deliverables in our SDLC, again, as part of test reports. Tester errors and test script errors were the majority of the test report defects. And I do have some data in a subsequent slide, but, and also again, as you can tell from all these steps, and if all defects are created equal, and we were giving the same level of importance to all of them, that can be very resource intensive. And you might say, well, how intensive was it? So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit of like, again, some data that we collected to show how intense it was. So UAT, again, different companies use different terminology. So UAT is user acceptance testing. So we tend to use more of the GAMP nomenclature for SDLC deliverables versus your typical like IQ, OQ, PQ, and PPQ kind of language. So again, just bear with me, but I think it's pretty clear what the user acceptance testing is. Obviously, I covered the name of the projects here. So again, to protect the innocent, but just there were like 3 projects that we looked at. One was a global project, one was an upgrade to an existing application, and the other one was a regional process or like a project, like a regional application. So you can see how many test scripts there were for each one of those projects for that particular phase. And you can see how many defects existed. So the first column where it says system security defects. So those are actually defects that actually were related to the application itself. And then what you see on the other columns is where there was something with the test data, or it was a tester error, or if there were errors with the test scripts. And then there were some others, like again, fell into some of the other categories. And you saw, I think in one of my early slides, what some of the other categories might have been. So if you look at this information, you can see pretty much, if you look at between the test data or tester errors and test script, which is again the orange and the gray, that is about like 3/4, like again roughly, of the defects were around or caused by the tester, or because the script had something that led to that particular defect. So it gives an idea again of how many here, like order of magnitude, but also again the effort that you would take to process those. So if we can go to the next slide.
And just a note here, thank you for highlighting this, because that is the pain, right? That is the pain when we hear that there is an added tax on validation. This is it right here. Or some folks might say the focus of CSA on testing. Well, it's not just on testing, right? It starts way up there, you know, identifying the risk, determining the risk, the impact. But then again, this is a major pain point to many organizations. And Stephen, if you want to jump in, because I know you had very similar experience at ICU, go ahead, just speak to that, please.
I'm looking, Ron, at the test script errors and the data tester errors, right? Which I sort of consider non-value added defects that we've all been writing for years. So just looking at your global project, you have 350 defects in that bucket. And if you look at, you know, on average, it takes about 2 hours of multiple people's time to review that defect, to close it out. You do a $95 an hour labor rate, and it's suddenly very expensive defects.
Yeah, and as you said, those are usually the non-value added ones. So because again, if your focus is to deliver an application that essentially it is fit for purpose, so meets its intended use, the ones that we should be putting attention on and getting resolved before we go into production are, again, the ones in blue. It's again like about 1/4, again, based on this small data set, right? Again, it might vary by project, but that is where the value is, by focusing on those defects that actually, essentially, there is something wrong with the application or how it was configured, or if it was customized. Again, there is something there is not doing what it's supposed to do. That's where the value is. By resolving that, you're delivering a product of high quality that essentially meets the intended use and meets the expectations of the customer.
And as Khaled had mentioned, we did a CSV and a CSA for a custom in-house manufacturing execution system for a company in Southern California. CSV had 220 documentation deviations and 22 functional. They went live, numerous post-go live issues. CSA had 20 documentation deviations and 47 functional deviations. Just shows when you move to that unscripted testing, not only are you spending less time writing deviations, but you're getting better at catching issues.
Mm-hmm. And here, Ron, I just want to make this is an advertisement opportunity for compliance group. You need to use testers from compliance groups so you don't have those testers error. Okay, next slide, please.
That's a shameless plug-in, but all right. So what, again, applying critical thinking here is, so again, if all defects are not created equal, and we're really trying to get value out of it and really putting our effort into the things that will improve the quality of the application that we're about to release. So what the team did here is they look at all these things and says, well, again, they're not necessarily all created equal. It is, what if we can create a separate category, again, based on risk, that we can spend less time trying to resolve it, because again, there is not necessarily a lot of value in doing it. And so the proposal was, well, what if we take, again, these like test script errors and tester error, and we create like a category of their own, right? So instead of calling them, so here's a little bit of the marketing or the semantics. So instead of referring to them as a defect, so again, it's actually referring to them as a test incident. And reason being is because, again, there is like in some of these cases, for example, if your tester had stubby fingers and press like between two keys and cause an error, what is the point of you going into like a root cause analysis and essentially, and what is going to be your fix is like essentially you're going to put like a shield in between keys on your keyboard so like a person can only press one at a time. Some of these things, again, could be like nonsense. So again, it could easily be resolved and say, yes, like again, the tester will say is like, yeah, like I accidentally press on the wrong key, is like, let's just repeat it, right? Or again, it has like minimal impact, keep moving on, versus cancel everything, restart like the whole testing program or testing routine.
Makes sense.
It's a little bit of semantics, but again, it just helps to create like a different way of thinking. Is like, let's focus on the things that improve the quality of the product, and spending less time on the ones that, yes, it was something that was abnormal, right? So there was an incident of sorts, but it doesn't require going into in-depth and doing like fishbone diagrams and all kinds of things. It's like, look, it's simple. It's like, yeah, just like address the situation, move on. So that's, again, it's part of what we did here. Again, like, is it there is this guy that he uses this expression, is this like instead of saying like rocket science or brain surgery, he says like, is this like a rocket surgery, right? So is this rocket surgery? No, but it is a clever solution to, again, address the situation. So if we can skip to the next slide, please. So there is this GAMP guide, which is, again, references on the left-hand side, so a risk-based approach to testing of GXP systems. And this particular figure that is showing on the screen, it just gives like an idea, again, of like, how would you treat something that is less formal, and then there is like an approach to doing that, and something where you need a little bit more structure, maybe being a little bit more formal. So basically, as I said on the previous slide, so defects, they follow essentially the GAMP's most formal process, right? Because those are the ones that there is something with the application that is not doing what it's supposed to. And so it deserves a little bit more of formality in trying to get to the bottom of it. And then there are the test incidents where, again, we take a least formal approach to that. So there is the reference. So again, it's not, again, we're not like going out and like in the left field. This is pretty much something that it's again, it's a recognized as an industry practice. So next slide, please.
Yeah, this is again, it's a great example of what we're doing in CSA. It's still within the current regulation, the current guidance of GAMP, right? And also the creativity, right? Creativity, to me, it's critical thinking. So you're not just following step by step. And for the industry in general, well, I've been one of them many years ago. I just want something to follow. I didn't really want to go outside the box. Just give me step by step how to validate that darn system so I can finish, right, and go live. But the idea is we just carried on a lot of baggage, right? We did the same risk to a manufacturing execution system versus a learning management system, or a spreadsheet, for instance. I was on a call with a client the other day, and I heard that they're doing design spec, right? Configuration spec for a spreadsheet. Well, first of all, try to get out of the spreadsheet validation business and try to get into some electronic system, right? And I know certain organizations cannot really go there, but please minimize the validation of these spreadsheets. You will get busted. You will get busted by the FDA, well, one of the regulators at least, for doing something wrong with a spreadsheet. All right. Did we lose Ron? Are you still?
I'm still here. I was just letting a crying dog out of the office. Otherwise, it was going to be pitiful here. So.
All right. Okay, back to you.
All right. So again, this is kind of like to bring things together here for you. So the proposed test incident process. So essentially how to tackle that, which is again the things that are again I would say there is less value in spending too much time with those. So again, a test incident will still document at a high level, like a root cause and resolution in, particularly here again, using HPLM or something like in the test run. So like in the comments. So you're still, again, you're not completely ignoring it because again, you know, it is like an incident or a defect, but it's just you again, essentially putting that in the comments of your test run versus like creating like a whole separate form for that. You need to go back to the other slide for me, like somehow it changed. So that is one piece. So essentially, we don't create a separate defect form, but there is still like a record saying, hey, again, there was like a little incident, what it was, and so it's just again, it just goes into the comments. And if you're using paper, again, it's just something that within your test script. A test incident resolution defines if additional test run is required. So again, depending what it is, again, you can right there decide, hey, let's just rerun it, or no, there is no need for rerunning. Again, it's pretty obvious, and essentially you go on. So there is kind of like you're giving more freedom for people to again do some of those things. So you're not prescribing like again step by step of what people need to do. A test incident is managed through completion, again, by the tester and QA. So essentially the tester and QA will, again, just complete that activity. But again, you're not involving everyone and their cousin to agree on that. Again, it should be something that is pretty simple and self-evident. And then the approval of the test run is sufficient without any additional approvals, right? So again, you're not creating again this bureaucracy where you have again everyone and their cousin approving it. It should be again because it is self-evident and it's simple in nature. And again, if there is a need for rerun, then that's what is going to be documented. And then defects. So again, so here's again separating between a test incident and a defect. So defects are summarized, at least for us, like in our SDLC deliverable. So typically in our compliance summary report, there's going to be something about defects, and again, if they were all resolved and whatever. But the incidents are not. So we're not going to be spending time summarizing all the incidents that we had and then putting that in our report. So again, that saves a significant amount of time as well, and just in gathering that information. So it is captured, so it's not ignored, but we're not going to like a great lengths and then extremes with that. And then our test incident strategy is typically documented in our compliance plan. So we, again, today, because again, this is something that we were doing as in test and learn, we captured that. I think once some of these things become a procedure, then it can be just like made a reference to a procedure. Say, look, this is how we address that. So I think the note, yeah.
I have a client I'm working with right now that they're paper based, but whenever they encounter a test incident, they build this into their test plan, and I want your thoughts on it. They log every single one of them, so they've got basically like a spreadsheet. They don't do a separate form, but every single incident goes into this log, and then they kind of attach that log to the report to show all the typos and everything that they had during testing.
I think there is an opportunity to simplify that, right? Again, particularly again, if it is like a typo, it's like, come on, just like just fix it.
Right.
Hey, like again, like especially if you're using like a paper system, like just cross initial and date, and then at the end is just basically yes, there were again some typos that were corrected along the way. At the end of the day, again, acceptance criteria was met. Like that's one of the stories. I think it's again, stay away from the spreadsheets. It's like they're just like they spell trouble. So again, it is again, it's a convenient tool, but sometimes it just lands you into more trouble. So I think again,
sometimes we over collect information, right? We over collect and we over present.
Yeah, and we get ourselves in trouble. So just a quick, there's a couple of questions actually, Ron, if you don't mind. A question about what is a compliance plan? If you can just elaborate a little bit on this.
Sure. So for us, a compliance plan is essentially when we start a project, like or like again for deploying a particular application. A compliance plan is something that essentially outlines your strategy for how you're going to achieve quality and compliance for that application. So it outlines, like for example, if you're following the SDLC, it also outlines again some of what will be some of the deliverables that you're going to be creating. If you're, for example, let's say you're going to do like a data migration, if you're going to be using like a sampling plan for that, or if you're going to be doing like 100% verification, and so essentially that's your strategy document. So essentially you outline.
So is it like a val plan? Is it essentially like a validation plan?
We call it like a compliance.
Okay. Tomato. Okay.
Yeah, potato. Yeah.
And you said something also about spreadsheet, which I think we got a question on. What do you mean we get in trouble with spreadsheet validation? So I'm going to say an example, and please share your example. An example just literally a week and a half ago, one of our clients, I'm not going to name the company, you're probably going to see it online somewhere, but they had a 483. Okay, it's a company that they are somewhat regulated, but they're not. Okay, but a spreadsheet was copied from a shared folder to another shared folder. Okay, and the inspector asked them to open that spreadsheet. When that person on the shop floor went to open that spreadsheet, there was no password on it. And the inspector asked, well, how come it's not password protected? Because you've got formulas and et cetera, behind the scene. Oh, no, it has password. Let me show you on the other folder. Went to the other folder and it had the password on it. But when he copied it to another machine, another folder, it lost all the security controls in it. Well, guess what? That's a 483. To me, that's a 21 CFR Part 11, right? And now they're going to ask them, well, did you validate it? Well, obviously they did not. They did not have any record and traceability of it. And again, to me, I'm very sensitive when it comes to spreadsheet, just because. So that was the answer. I hope that satisfied. Do you have any other examples, Ron?
Sure. So the challenge with spreadsheets is that number one is similarly, like not all spreadsheets are created equal, right? And I think you need to make a distinction between spreadsheets that are like GXP, meaning essentially you're doing that in order to meet a requirement of your quality system, and so the spreadsheet is essentially you're automating that activity. And then you have your non-GXP spreadsheets where, again, maybe you're just collecting some information. So it's the kind of things like, so first off, you need to you to have either through a procedure or through, again, some type of a compliance analysis where it basically says, look, this is the intended use of my spreadsheet, and I'm using that to meet a GXP requirement. So essentially it needs to be validated, or it's not for GXP purposes, and so maybe you don't need to validate. But the other thing is, like, spreadsheets by themselves, they cannot be made Part 11 compliant. So essentially there is no audit trail. You have like no access controls or security controls unless there is, again, like essentially you don't have roles. So either, let's say if you put a password, either you're in, you're out, but once you're in, again, anyone can do anything. So again, like, it lacks some of the controls. Again, this is all like spreadsheets on their own. So no audit trail, no electronic signature. So if you're going to use spreadsheets, again, if that is still your tool of choice, then there are these things out there which are called wrapper solutions. And so they will help you to make a spreadsheet Part 11 and X11 compliant. And again, these are not sponsors of this event, but I'll mention two applications that can do that. One is eInfotree, the other one is Compliance Builder. So if you combine the two and, again, put all the things in place, then yes, you can make your spreadsheets compliant. But there is some work that is involved in that. And the thing is, most of the time, people don't want to do that extra work. They just want the convenience of the spreadsheet. Yeah. And then essentially, then it's like a hope and a prayer that no one is going to question it and it doesn't come up during a health authority inspection.
So I think, Ron, we need to do a follow-up webinar just on
spreadsheets.
I have a lot of examples to share, and hopefully tips and tricks from the FICSA team on how to really validate a spreadsheet. So for those of you on watching us, please keep an eye on a spreadsheet validation or spreadsheet assurance.
Okay.
Did I lose everyone? No.
No, I think just your image went away.
My image went away.
It was carrying dogs anyway, so we're good.
All right. So what we're gonna do now, can you see my screen though?
I can see your screen and you're back on the screen. If you just go back to the previous slide just for 1 second, because there was something at the bottom, again, just like trying to to wrap that up, which is,
sure.
Again, so categorization of defects versus incidents, it's not really introducing any risk to the system or as like, again, test scripts and tester errors are typically human errors. So they have like no impact in the way that the system or the application is functioning based on design. So you're not introducing any risk, but you're definitely saving yourself a significant amount of effort in doing that. So if we now go to my last slide, which is basically just like been summarizing it. So again, you'll be able to see, so again, here you see the two terms, so the defect versus the incident. So on the defects, which are the ones related to the application and how the application functions or didn't function, it is a little bit more robust. As you can see, like the various steps are involved. And when we're dealing with, again, tester error or script error, it is less robust. So again, there are still some steps. There is still, like, it's not completely, again, as Steven said earlier, it's like it's not undocumented. right? It is just, again, you do a little, actually quite a bit less, and you're still, again, looking at it and you're resolving it, but you're not spending a significant amount of time doing like fishbone diagrams and FMEAs and all that. You just look at the situation, apply critical thinking or your best judgment, you move on. So that's the end of my my slides. And so I think, I don't know if Steve or Khalid, if you have anything else, and then we can go into Q&A.
Sure. We actually got quite a few questions, so I'm going to go through them with you. So I'm going to go with the questions that are specifically to Ron, and then I'll go to mine a little bit after, if I can see it. All right. Okay, sorry. I'll be right there. Okay. Sorry, my apology. I just found it. Okay. All right. So question by Angela. Could this be more generic? An incident is an issue that does not require a code move to remediate. Therefore, no formal defect created. Is that clear a question, or you need additional info? So the question,
if you just like read it for me again, sorry.
Sure. Could this, and I think talking about the incident versus defect, could this be more generic? An incident is an issue that does not require a code move to remediate, therefore no formal defect created. So in other words, is an incident more casual than an actual defect? And I think you alluded to that, right?
The answer is yes. Again, kind of like you need to, like, for me in particular, again, if you look at the size of the company that I work for, and again, we work with 3 separate segments, which is pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and consumer products. So like cosmetics and over-the-counter, also like, again, low-risk medical devices. So I have a lot of scrutiny from different health authorities. So I need to pick solutions that allow me to move in that direction, but I cannot, like, sometimes I cannot go into the deep end of the pool like all at once. So I have to measure my risk. So this is like, it is a first step in that direction, is to get people used to the idea of not all defects are created the same. We can treat them differently. It's not adding more risk to the application by doing so. And eventually, again, we can expand it. So I think to answer the question is like, can you like rationalize and simplify? Absolutely. Again, I just use some of the data. Again, actually not me, like the team that worked on this used some of the data and found an opportunity to make an incremental step. Again, you can take it further. So there is nothing that prevents you. I think it's the whole thing is understanding, again, how much, what is the appetite for risk that exists in your business, and then moving accordingly.
And also, let's be clear about something. You know, words matter. So I have worked with organizations that call it an incident report, an issue report, a deviation, a defect, and a fault. They all mean the same thing. So I mean, the takeaway here from Ron should be whatever you call your formal documented form, this is something else, right? So let's not get caught up on whether we call it an incident report or whatever it is. The idea is you have some trigger for a documented analysis and then a lower level issue.
Categorization, I think, is the most important piece here too. Well, this is a good segue to another question from Kiyet. Can Khalid please elaborate on the concept of creativity is the same as critical thinking? So I'm actually going to ask Stephen and then back to you, Ron. So Stephen, just can you elaborate on the concept of creativity?
You know, I was a VAL lead for many years, and then I was a quality rep for many years over IT systems. And what I found to be the most success was that ability to think outside of the SOP. You know, frankly, if all you can do is follow an SOP, hire $15 an hour people to follow an SOP. It's easy to enforce. Keep an open mind. That's what this is about. You know, it's not just quality or validation that has the ideas. I would have the developers come to me and say, hey, for example, we want to try an agile project, and our current validation procedure only addresses waterfall. How do we do it? So what I say is, think about how you'll tell that story. Think about how you'll defend that story and document it. Think creatively. You know, listen to new ideas when people present them to you. Try to abolish, no, we can't do that. Think about, how can we do that? How can we implement that idea? That's critical thinking. That's creative thinking.
All right, Ron, any comments?
Sure. I always say, and folks that work with me will laugh at this one, but I always say, like, when you're in quality, you have two choices. You can be the no in innovation or fun and functional. So so it's like one of those things that, and I think I was thinking, is like, well, one thing that differentiates humans from animals is the fact that we are able to think and to be creative, right? But the other thing is also what separates humans from robots is that, again, robots can only execute to whatever, again, it was created and added to them. So again, you can go through a mechanical process and can just like always execute. But I think sometimes you need to ask yourself, and you say, yeah, I'm following my procedure, but sometimes you have to come to the realization that your procedure is wrong. Again, you could be executing flawlessly to your procedure, but guess what? Your procedure is wrong. And in my auditing careers, again, if we had more time, I could tell you some stories, but when I did auditing, I found many of such situations where the customer was unhappy with the product, and then at the factory they're saying, but we're following our procedure. Yes, guess what? What the customer wants and what your procedure says are two different things, and you're executing perfectly to your procedure, but guess what? The procedure is wrong. That's not what the customer wants. So again, I have stories to tell, but that maybe is for another day.
Let's go to the next question. Can the test incident strategy be captured in the change control tool with a Solomon CR and CO, for example, if not part of the project change? Okay, so can the test incident strategy be captured in the change control tool?
So Solomon is a solution manager, something that is used for change control in ERP systems. I think usually like it works with like SAP.
Yeah.
So let's say you're doing like so it's not like a brand new project, and maybe it is a change to an existing application. So could you capture that in there? Sure. Again, if you don't have this strategy in a procedure that you can make a reference to, you can always again capture that in your change control and say, okay, I'm applying this approach in there. I think what really helps is moving from essentially from just making reference in some of your strategy documents to sometimes like having some of these things like in a procedure that you can reference to. But to my previous point, is like sometimes you need to question your procedures, and it's the kind of thing that, so like, again, the way we were doing this was like initially we were capturing in the strategy documents because it was still part of a test and learn. So it was not breaking any rules and it's not necessarily like bending anything. It was just like, again, a different approach, but it was within the boundaries that we were given. But I think we are at a point now where I think we have used it enough to have worked out some of the kinks to say, okay, like we can actually put that on a procedure so everyone can just reference a procedure. So they don't need to even, again, it will even simplify that because they, again, just say, okay, I'm managing defects following procedure XYZ. And so that's it. So just back to the original question, could you, again, document that in your change control? Sure. And I think eventually if there is a procedure to reference to, then it just makes it even easier.
Ron, that's a great point. Create a defect procedure. I see so many organizations that don't have a dedicated defect procedure.
True.
Okay. I am going to ask another question. How do you document defects / incidents not resolved And do you have a category for showstoppers?
So again, I think in some cases it depends on which methodology you're following. So if you're doing waterfall or if you're doing agile, so in waterfall, again, sometimes if you have, let's say, a defect that, or agile for that matter, you have a defect and you're not able to resolve it before essentially your go live. So in those cases, you need to evaluate, say, okay, is this a showstopper? And if it is a showstopper, well, then you probably should not be going live, right? It defeats the point if it is a showstopper. So it has to be resolved. But if it is something that is not a showstopper, typically when, again, if using agile methodology, then typically that will be added to the backlog. So essentially you capture that, so you know it is, again, it is in your bug tracker, but it is added to your backlog. So as you're then doing your next sprint or in a future sprint, that can be resolved. But another thing that I have seen people using as an approach is, if it is something that is significant enough that should be brought to resolution, because maybe it is part of the requirements, because sometimes you find things but they're not part of your requirements. So is, again, you just found it, again, because you were, again, testing it, but it wasn't necessarily part of. But if it is part of your requirements and suddenly saying, look, I have this requirement, I'm not able to meet it, it's not a showstopper, I still want to advance. Many times we might open a non-conformance. So essentially you have a way of having visibility to that, so it doesn't fall through the cracks and you say, okay, like eventually we need to resolve this. So it's a way of compromising but not giving the farm away, in the sense of it, like you're not brushing that under the rug, you're creating a mechanism that provides visibility, because typically non-conformances, they feed into management review, right? So if it goes unresolved for a very long time, or someone decides to just kill this thing, well, there is at least some awareness to management. That, yes, so there is that visibility. So it's not shoved there under the rug.
Exactly.
A couple other ideas, Ron, and I think the really most important thing you said is, when you have a defect that you can't resolve, sometimes it's because a vendor has to fix something, right? In your report, put in your rationale for release. That's really important. You're releasing with open defects. So you do want to close that defect. You want to close it to another quality record. Ron had mentioned non-conformance. A couple other options there. If your organization uses problem reports, close it to a problem report, track it that way. Last possibility, close it to your risk management report. Go back to your functional risk assessment and indicate in that functional risk assessment that that's a requirement that didn't pass, and what you're doing, the mitigations that you're enhancing to beef it up.
And just to add something to that one is, like, one, again, putting my auditor hat from my days of auditing, is what I have seen sometimes is there is an issue, and instead of opening a non-conformance, it's just like it is mentioned in your, like, let's say your summary report, your validation report. It is mentioned there, but then it is signed off, the application goes live, nobody follows through.
It's buried.
So right, so it lacks the visibility. Essentially, it does not have a chance of staying alive until it gets resolved. And so I would say try to avoid that, because that will essentially, like, invariably, like in health authorities, when they come to do audits, they always want to see your compliance report or your summary report or like your validation report. And if it is, and then let's say you haven't touched it for 3 years, and then you pull that up, it says, oh, by the way, we had all these like defects that we could not resolve, we'd release it. And then the next question is going to be, so what did you do with those? It's like, and then it's the deer in the headlights is like, well, we actually haven't done anything. Well, now you're like essentially opening yourself up for some trouble. So put into a mechanism that essentially will keep it alive until it's resolved. And sometimes, again, an organization might decide that, yes, that was a requirement, we couldn't really make it to work. Yep. There is really not a technically viable solution, and maybe we need to kill that requirement because we cannot make it work. But at least it is like an informed decision, and so again, it's not something that is just like buried and forgotten.
So I think we can take one more question. We're about 3 minutes. Question from Carol. What about enhancement or new features? Do you do the same risk management as you do for defects?
Can you read that for me again? Sorry, like I
do it again. So what about
an enhancement that doesn't pass? An enhancement that doesn't pass.
Right, and it generated defects, right? Do you do the same risk management as you do for defects?
I would. Again, it's like, again, an enhancement is just like a new set of requirements that you're adding to your application. So again, you expect it to work or to do what, again, to meet a certain intended use. So again, the same principles would apply. I think a lot of the examples that I gave were around like a new application, but it could be, again, an enhancement or something of that nature.
And Carol, typically, like, I think the scenario you're talking about is part of that enhancement works, but all of that enhancement doesn't work. Because if it all doesn't work, you obviously don't want to roll it into production. But if you've got a situation where you've got some bundled functions into that enhancement, some of them don't work, you're still going to go live. Yes, you can close it out to the risk management report. I'll have a separate conversation with you. I know this, Carol.
Great. I guess we're at time. When I saw Chris, he's like, okay, you're done. Yes, sir, we're done. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think really, I definitely let Ron say the last word, but from my perspective, I just want the industry, whoever is listening to us, to please proceed with applying CSA. Don't forget to get your GPG guide. You're going to have a lot of information in it and different flavors on how to apply critical thinking. Keep that in mind. And back to you, Ron. Any last words?
Sure. If you are a J&J employee, we actually have this guide because we have a corporate subscription. So if you don't know how to get to it, just reach out to me. Now you have my name. We can get you a copy of that. As for the content that was shared here today, again, it's about an idea on the how-tos. Kind of like, again, just try it out. Just again, give it a try. Again, like to something to where you're comfortable with, and then like gather some information and maybe you evolve from there. But just again, try it out. You have nothing to lose and a lot to gain.
We are living in interesting times. We've been doing the same thing for 15, 20, 25 years. And we are collectively as an industry now challenging all of those assumptions that we've made. So I'd say to everyone, keep an open mind, try things.
And finally, for those of you who are attending, please join our FICSA LinkedIn group. There's always news, questions, myth versus fact that the FICSA team is creating, and we're going to post it on there too. So please follow us and let me or Ron or Stephen, if you have any question, we will share the PDF version of this presentation. Please, for whoever is attending us from a consulting firm, please don't copy it. And that's all about it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks.